folks. Welcome back. It's another episode of Kicks Over Coffee. I'm super excited today to talk to my good friend, Chris Hillyer. He is the Director of Innovation at Deckers Brand. So, of course, they have Teva and UGG and Hoka and Sanuk, and I'm probably missing a couple of more. But what is really interesting to me is every time I talk to Chris, he's got some new project he's working on in terms of digital design and digital development. So Chris, thanks for coming on and chatting with us a little bit about what's happening in the industry. And I think what we're really interested in talking about today is over the last year, there seems to be a lot of new software and technologies helping companies in this digital design, digital development space. So maybe you can share with us some new developments, what's kind of exciting that's happening, and stuff that's actually applicable, because we know there's some fun things that are happening, but they may not always be meaningful to our bottom line. So maybe you can take us through some ideas and some things that are happening.
Sure. Good morning. I just got back from New York. I was at the PI Apparel show, and I'd even though it says apparel in the title, I think it's a very applicable show to anyone interested in learning more about the digital developments going on in both the apparel and footwear industries. There's a bunch of footwear people there. VF was speaking, Adidas was speaking, but really to answer your question, the presentation I gave is really this end-to-end solution for 3D and not just about how it can help your design and development track, but also how it starts to generate these, people call them digital twin. And in the engineering world, that's a very ambitious word, just from the standpoint that, that's really truly trying to represent every detail of a product. Whereas a good 3D model or a 3D scan of a shoe can speak a million words to us. So there's a couple of things that I'm particularly excited about. One is leveraging 3D for things like consumer insights. So being able to get feedback on your products before you've actually created or produced any samples, getting that consumer feedback. And 3D is a really safe environment to do that. People are, we've been popping stuff on Instagram, showing people, designs, and you're able to spin them around and zoom in and really get an intimate understanding of what that shoe is. And yet we haven't had to make a sample yet, and we're getting that feedback up front. So I think that's a really nice one. One place that I'm really excited about seeing the evolution is when we get into merchandising. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple different companies that are starting to pop up that are showing, I think, a lot of promise as far as being able to drop your 3D models into an environment and being able to switch and swap and push things around on shelves and look at those tabletop assortments, whether it's in VR or just on the screen, and having that insight as to what your collection is going to look like without having to produce a bunch of shoes. And I think that's, as we talk about sustainability and the impact that digital can have for that, it really is about generating things that give us insight and an understanding of what that product looks like without having to produce a bunch of samples.
What kind of companies are working on some of this stuff that people could look at and explore and play around with?
As far as software companies?
Yeah. Software companies.
Yeah, it's like, we speak a lot about how we use Romans CAD. Romans CAD is a really comprehensive way of building a shoe. It's very much more on the engineering side of it. So it's like a little
pattern making and things like that.
Yeah, but it's incredible when you really think of it that, we have a new employee that just started on the Hoka brand, and we were talking to him about it yesterday, and just this idea that, you can go in the software and change a shoelace from blue to yellow and your BOM updates. We're starting to, experiment with the idea of getting costing data out of it. So Romans CAD is a really, I think, good one to look at. Anyone that's been doing some research in this, I'm sure they've seen a company called The Foundry. They make a product called Modo. That's another one to look at. We use Modo very successfully as our rendering tool. So it's once the models come out of Romans CAD, we need to take pretty pictures and videos of those shoes. So it's a separate software that we use for that. And Modo's extremely good at doing things like fur. So representing what fur might look like on our product, which with the UGG brand, you can imagine, we've become quite the experts of representing fur in digital ways. sometimes to the challenge of our factories to represent that fur the way that we decided we liked it in a digital
Right.
form. But yeah,
What
I think.
about? I know Adobe has come out with some stuff lately too. Correct? Like,
Yeah, Adobe's another great one. My friend Ross at Adobe, he's heading up the Dimension team. So Adobe Dimension's a really great option now. Adobe Dimension, I think that the way that I like to describe it is that it's kind of 2.5D. It's 3D for people that have been working in 2D their entire careers. So the really natural opportunity for Dimension is things like packaging, places that you might have a existing T-shirt or something like that you can drop in there, but you want to work on graphics and colors in a 3D environment. So Dimension's great at not necessarily generating the 3D design, but to apply graphics and colors and textures to those designs to really see what they're going to look like in 3D. We're just so used to in our industry seeing stuff, as a flat 2D side view of a product and praying that when it comes back from the factory that it's going to look the way that we had in our head. And I think that, if we really I think reflect on it, we're often disappointed at the results. And so 3D gives us an opportunity to just understand in much more detail what that product is going to look like. And I'm not gonna lie to you. 3D takes a lot of time and money and effort and advocates within the company to even entertain. And it takes longer. It takes longer to build out a full 3D model of a product than it ever would to sketch it on a piece of paper. But I think the danger that a lot of us run into is when you sketch it on a piece of paper and send it over the ocean, you've left a lot to chance. And you haven't necessarily done a complete job of describing what that product is supposed to look like. You haven't been able to communicate internally what that product is supposed to look like. And I think very often the factory that's been tasked to produce a sample of that sketch, they're also challenged. So we've found that 3D, and we haven't implemented this across all the brands. This is still very much in the pilot phase, but we're finding so much value to communication and internal vetting and understanding. And then, like I said, it's like you have these assets that then all of a sudden become something that you can look at in a virtual reality environment, and showcase them in a model of your store. There's a company that's in the Netherlands called Pixelpool, and I would encourage people to check them out. Pixelpool is doing some amazing environments and being able to basically create retail environments and have an understanding of what all your product is going to look like in photo detail within a store, which is really powerful.
That is pretty cool. So what you're saying basically is I think a lot of people who look at this and explore it see there are challenges related to getting the right people to work on this, finding the right software, because obviously, as you said, there's an assortment. There's not one all be all software tool that can do everything that you need. So there's a lot of work at the front end and a lot of time at the front end, but it reduces risks and creates more certainty as you go through the production cycle. Correct?
Well, yeah, but I think additionally, Andy, what I'm trying to say is that there's so much value beyond that.
Right.
And once you have a model of a shoe, you can change the color, and you don't have to sample it. You know what that product looks like. You know how it fits. You know what the consumers, what the consumers have how they've responded to it. You tweak the color and introduce a new color digitally. You can vet that with your consumers on Instagram, and you can replace catalog imagery of it. You can have a digital assortment or a digital catalog where you can spin shoes around. It's like all of a sudden you're able to leverage so much more just because you've gone this direction. And
it's in essence kind of your own trend analysis, right? Whether your own trend, whether your own colorway.
If you use it that way, it absolutely can be. It's just a better tool. And I think that's the thing, is it's not going to make better, may very well not make better shoes for you. It's definitely upfront not going to save you money until you start leveraging the opportunities that you have with it. And that's why it hasn't been an easy transition for this industry. And even internally, there's a lot of tough questions. And retraining all your designers to have to use a different tool. That can be met with opposition, and I get it. It's like I'm an industrial designer, and we were learning 3D, when I was in school, which was 20 years ago. And, every single other industry on the planet, they think we're crazy. It's like the toothbrush that you used this morning was designed in 3D. It's like, someone drew maybe a picture or two of it, and then they worked in 3D to get all the surfaces the way that they wanted it. They probably 3D printed a sample of what that toothbrush might look like and put it in their hand and imagine what that might feel like. And then they went to production and they did all their colors and everything else in 3D. So this whole idea that we draw a picture and send it to a faraway factory, and they return a sample based on what we want, and it takes 3 months. It's like, it's not sustainable. And I think that, this is about responsiveness and communication and having a more efficient pipeline, because, we go to sample, there's so many people here at Deckers that celebrate the sample sale,
right?
Because they can get Uggs and Hokas and Tevas and Sanuks for good prices, but it makes me sick. It's frustrating that we have such a process, and this is not just Deckers. This is every company in the industry. We're generating thousands of samples to make up our minds, to help us, and we're trying to make business decisions. This is a business. It's not a game. I mean, we're working. We have amazing people working on the staff here. People aren't making foolish decisions.
Right.
In filling up sample rooms with that. We're trying to push our businesses, which is what we're all tasked with. But I think, in my opinion, being able to find ways to have better clarity up front, I think is worth investigating. And I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm not going to say that it's potentially even the solution for everyone, but I think that there are some big opportunities in there.
Awesome. So last couple of questions as we wrap this up. One, what's your favorite coffee brand, since this is Kicks Over Coffee? And then two, you can say Folgers, it's okay. And then two, what's something you've seen over the last 6 months that really piqued your curiosity, or are really made you excited? And it can be anything in terms of innovation in our industry.
Yeah. This coffee thing is going to be a challenge for me. This is hilarious. I'm turning 46 in September, and I've just recently started drinking coffee.
There you go. All right.
I grew up in Seattle, which is probably why I got kicked out of Seattle so many years ago. I wasn't a coffee drinker. So I'm not going to respond to the coffee one.
Interesting.
Although I have had some killer Nescafe on trips to Asia.
All right. About the innovation that's really
I think that the way, there's one thing that I've been particularly excited about, and that is the improvements on scanning. So I talked a lot about 3D models and 3D views, but there's a whole nother side of it, which is to take an existing shoe or sample and to scan it. And there's a couple different ways of doing it. One of them is called photogrammetry, which is literally putting a product on a table and having 120 digital SLR cameras surrounding it, and you might have seen this for, when they filmed Avatar and stuff like that. They're taking pictures or images of the actors this way and acquiring 3D models of them through this technique. But photogrammetry is able to generate a very accurate representation of a product that then turns it into a 3D model. And one thing that I'm particularly excited about is the use of photogrammetry, as well as another process, which is structured light scanning, where you put a shoe on a turntable and it's another type of digital scanner to acquire these 3D models. And both of those technologies have become much more accessible and easy to do. So the ability to generate 3D models of existing product, and where this is impactful is, replacing samples again, is if you have one everyone can have a 3D, representation of that across the globe. So as long as one is produced, you don't need to make 1,000 and mail, send them off in the mail so everybody can hold one, because, the fifth colorway of an UGG boot, do you really need to have it in your hand, or can you just represent it with a good image? And it's something that we're really looking into. And I think that it's going to have a huge sustainability impact for our company. And I also think it's fun. I mean, it's fun to be able to have these models and switch and swap and communicate with something so rich. The other place where that has so much validity is just in the development process. So having a scan of a model and, or scanning a shoe immediately as it comes off, the sample room floor. People say, we were just in a meeting yesterday and they were just like, yeah, and your design team can see exactly what that sample looks like immediately. And it's like, yeah. Or even the local, development office can decide whether they're going to go visit that factory that day and see that model in person, or if, a couple things need to be tweaked before they make that 2-hour trek. So yeah. I think things like that, have huge, huge potential. And someone was laughing. They were just like, well, can't they just take a bunch of photos? And it's like, you know what? They could, but funny enough, it doesn't happen as much as you might think it should. People very often will throw it in a shoebox and put it in the mail, and 3 or 4 days later and a couple $100, we'll have the sample sitting in front of us that is nowhere near what we were asking for.
Right.
So I believe that these scanning technologies can really help out as far as just communication, as well as representing these products in a pretty high fidelity manner that can be leveraged on all sorts of different platforms.
Yeah, I've seen some of the new scans that you can actually see inside the shoe with very good detail, where you can see the insole and the branding and even the country of origin label in there, and then I think some people, when they think of scanning, they think of what we were getting 5 years ago, and now it's almost too realistic, where you can see it and flip it around, right? So
I mean, it's not perfect. I mean, I don't know if it's, if you have a fashion brand and you spend a lot of money with high-end photography, it may not replace that today. But just because, the depth of the shadows and some of the qualities might not be up, we run into a lot of trouble. You can't scan fur, because every individual fiber isn't being scanned. So it looks kind of clumpy, or it looks really clumpy. And then sandals can be tricky just because there's a bunch of, void on the inside of the product. So it's hard for it to quite understand exactly what the structure or architecture of a sandal is. But, most of the shoes produced aren't, don't have fur and aren't sandals. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And depending on how you want to use it, if it's a development tool, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can come across, a scan that gives you a good understanding of what the stitches look like and what the quality of the logo is and things like that. Maybe you don't want to put it in front of your customers, but could definitely be used internally. And it's just good for communication. Even often our supply chain is getting so spread out, and we don't just go to Dongguan anymore and go to, and all the factories are right there. It's we're spread out all over the place. So having solutions where these samples can all be in one place. Imagine, a virtual reality environment where you get all of your, first round samples and they live in VR, and you can go into that space with that headset and your whole team can have a conversation about the line and move things around and put them on shelves and see what they look like. That's available today. And I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah. Sounds awesome. Well, as we kind of wrap it up, I do want to do a plug. Chris will be speaking at our Material Summit in Portland this August, and he'll be discussing some of these very issues in regards to material development and scanning systems and visualization. So as always, Chris, thanks for the collab and for joining us today.
My pleasure. Have a good lunch.
Yep.
All right, take care.